Welcome into One-on-One Nightly, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Hope you're all doing well on this Wednesday night. I am Brian Raybacks, joined alongside Ryan Gregware. We are taking you until 10 p.m. tonight. And Ryan, we have a great show planned tonight. You know, the NBA playoffs are in full swing. A lot of exciting basketball everywhere you watch. And, you know, baseball as well. And a lot of exciting hockey, too, and important NFL transactions. Ryan, how are you feeling right now?
I'm doing great. We're talking the four major sports, also some other stuff coming up too. I think we're on the same wavelength today. We're wearing the same shirt. Was not planned. I'm
Absolutely.
ready. Let's have a good show, man.
Yes, sir. We're going to start off with if we're going to talk playoff basketball, you have to talk about possibly the most exciting team in the NBA, and that would be the Brooklyn Nets. And boy, did they put on a show on Monday night. They absolutely blew out the Milwaukee Bucks, winning by a score of 125 to 86. Kevin Durant, 32 points, 12 of 18 shooting. They just dominated this team in a way that I didn't think this was possible. You know, the Bucks, Ryan, I want your opinion with the Bucks, as well as they played the Nets in the regular season. You know, we came into this series thinking that the Bucks were going to be possibly the biggest threat to the Nets all postseason. And I didn't expect anything like we saw on Monday night. Did you?
No, and it's funny because you just said how the Nets are the most exciting team in basketball. And I think there's a few perspectives and how you can look at that. On a sense of like actual watching the game and stuff, what they do on offense is unbelievable. But exciting in a sense where I'm looking towards, the next rounds and the finals and possible matchups. It's not exciting because this team is just too good. I don't see a way that they go down. You talked about, I thought the Bucks would give them some trouble. I never in my life thought the Bucks would win this series, but I did think they could take it 6-7. And when Harden goes down 1 minute to game one, I suddenly, I'm not a Nets fan, I'm a Knicks fan. I suddenly am like, okay, this is the shot that the Nets go down. And the way they've been able to rebound without Harden, who I think people made the case that he was their most valuable player throughout the season. The way their offense ran through him was something to watch. But the way they've been able to play these last two games, particularly in game two, I mean, it was a dismantling. Like, it wasn't even close. No Harden. You also don't have Jeff Green, who was a solid role player throughout the season. So, yeah, like the Nets, they are in full cruise control right now. They have their eyes on one prize, and that's the title. I don't see anyone stepping in their way right now. They just look too good. They're so much in sync, and they're not even at full strength. And we'll see what happens when they get at full strength. But for now, it's just really something to watch.
Right. And one of the main points that, I was making as the Nets were building into the postseason is, okay, we know the three guys, we know what they can do, but can they stay healthy? And at the start of the series, they have not been staying healthy, with Harden going out. He's out for game three, too. And the wheels kind of start spinning like, oh no, they're hurt. Harden can't play. And yeah, a lot of people saying Harden might be the biggest piece to this team. And we saw the Nets play the Bucks without James Harden in the regular season, and it didn't end well. So I was really expecting the Bucks to really capitalize on this, and they really didn't. And with the way the Bucks played on Monday, it's really hard to see them as a real contender in this series. And they're a team that has not had success in the playoffs in the last couple of years, and you're seeing it. I mean, Chris Middleton can't hit a shot. He's shooting 30% from the field, and Giannis had a big game one, but in game two, he was just shut down. And credit to the Nets. They are a great team. And the interesting thing about the Nets is that I think we learned on Monday that there's so much more than just the big three to this team. This team, when they want to, they can play great defense. I mean, you have Claxton, you have Blake Griffin, you have all these defenders, and they held the NBA's top scoring team in the regular season to 86 points without Jeff Green, who is supposed to be a big piece of their defense. That's one of the big takeaways that I saw. This team can play fierce defense when they want to, as well as score the ball as much as they want.
Yeah, I think like you talk about how they lose Harden in game one, and so the Bucks do end up losing that game. And at least you could take from that is, even though you lost a game on the road, you have a chance to split. You get the home court advantage, and they can't do it in game two, and it's so demoralizing. You talk about how the Nets have struggled, or the Bucks rather, in the playoffs, and it seems like they're hitting their wall again. I don't know necessarily if that's the case. I honestly just think it's the Nets being too good because usually we see like a linear progression in the NBA where young teams, especially with a guy like Giannis, they'll slowly get better. And I do think we were seeing that from the Bucks. I do think they are much improved from last year. The Eric Bledsoe, Drew Holiday swaps definitely worked out there. But I just think the Nets talked about how they're more than the big three. And I feel like we've known this all along. I have been ringing the bell on this. Joe Harris is such a good player. He shoots 50%
So
from
good.
three. And like what they ask him to do is perfect because he's not asked to create his own shot and do a million different things. He's asked to make wide open threes, and he does that as good as anybody in the league. KD's a guy who like he will tell you he will be straight up with you, and he's talked about how like Joe Harris is as good as a shooter. You know, he's just below like the Steph and Clays of the world, who are obviously the two best you have. And then you have Blake Griffin too. I think it's really fascinating to see Brian like how he's reinvented himself because early in his career, those Clippers years, he was an athletic freak. You know, he was a jump all over the place guy, and he's kind of reverted his game now. He's a hustle guy. He's jumping for loose balls. He's fighting with Bobby Portis, and that's exactly what this team needs because he's adding a new energy that they definitely, when Harden was out, that they have needed, and it's been nice to see because you know his career looked like it was on the downfall after Detroit. What was going to happen next? He signs for a minimum, but it's been a perfect fit with the Nets, and yeah, they really are more than the big three. And right now it's a big two, but it wouldn't look like it. To think that right now, like the way they're playing, they have another top seven at the very worst player who isn't playing is scary because like this Nets team, there's just too many guys. You just can't stop them. And especially like when one guy is an off night on the Bucks, you really can't go anywhere else because the Nets can afford to have an off game from someone, right? But the Bucks can't. They have to play almost perfect basketball to even try. And I don't know if this will be a sweep. I feel like the Bucks could still, you know, steal a game, maybe two if they get really lucky and Harden stays hurt. But I just don't see any way they can make this a series. And when you're going into a home game three and that's the outlook you have, it's never what you want.
I mean, yeah, I'm in lockstep with you. My expectations for the Bucks were really diminished after game two, and we'll see how everything goes. Game three tomorrow night on 7:30, and no James Harden again, and we'll see how the Bucks respond at home. But after seeing the performance, the Nets are the clear favorites. Obviously, we knew that, but if this didn't say that the Nets are the top dogs in the NBA, I don't know what will. And it kind of gets your head spinning like, okay, who can compete with this team? You know, there's some good teams in the West, but outside of the Bucks, you have the Sixers and the Hawks left in the East. And I got to ask you, do you think either of these teams can really match up well with this Brooklyn team?
Yeah, I talked about earlier how I thought Milwaukee had the best chance. I did believe going into the series that this was the NBA Finals, right? The teams out west will go into in a minute, but I don't think that they have enough. And the way that the Nets are playing, especially versus the Bucks, I'd be so confident to take the Nets versus the field right now. Like I really would. So the Sixers Hawks series is interesting because the Hawks obviously stole game one. Joel Embiid and the Sixers come back in game two. They dropped 40. And so like the Sixers, you know, obviously you can make the case they were one game better in the regular season. I can see why Embiid can turn on that other level to where you just can't stop him. But I really don't. I see them taking care of the Hawks in 5 or 6 games. DeAndre Hunter, a crushing blow for the Hawks. He killed the Knicks in that series. He's out for the year. He gave you 15 a game, and he has an elite defense. So that really hurts Atlanta here. So I like Philly to win that series, but I can't sit up here and say that I think they have a shot versus the Nets. All year, I've thought the Nets would get to the finals. I didn't think it'd be this easy. I thought they'd have one series in the East, whether it be to Philly or Milwaukee, that pushed them to 6 or 7. I can't see that anymore. Like, I really do think the Nets will get out of the East with maybe they have one loss right now. I would set the over under at 3.5 total losses before the finals, and I would still take that under. I think they're just too good, have too much firepower, and especially with Harden, the injury doesn't seem like it is season threatening. It seems like it's a wait and see game. And right now, there's no urgency. I don't think they should play him the rest of the series the way they're able to take care of the Bucks without him. But as long as he's healthy, I don't see any reason why the Sixers would pose any threat.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what they do with James Harden going on in this series. And it'll be interesting going forward to see the narrative is going to become what team can stop the Nets. And in the Western Conference, there are a handful of good teams left. And two of them played last night, and that would be the Utah Jazz and the LA Clippers. The Jazz winning game one last night, a very exciting game, 112-109. The highlight of this game would have to be Donovan Mitchell, 45 points, 32 in the second half. And he really just put on a show and carried the Utah Jazz to a impressive victory past the Los Angeles Clippers. And but the thing is with game one here, I wasn't really able to take a lot from this because, the Clippers, they played a tough 7 game series with the Mavericks, and, they're probably banged up, and they probably, had to be fatigued a little bit, you would think. So it's an interesting game one, but I think the Jazz looked real good. But I'm not taking anything away from the Clippers. I think the Clippers can still be big players for the rest of this series going forward.
Yeah, the West, like for as gloomy it is in the East, with basically the Nets almost like already locking in a finals appearance, the West is the complete opposite. It's so fun to me because these are 4 teams that have never been there before, right? The Clippers have the stars, they clearly have all the talent in the world. Their franchise has never made a Western Conference Finals, though, in the history. And you have the Suns, Nuggets, and Jazz, who are all led by like inexperienced guys. So the team you have that matches up with presumably the Nets is going to be kind of a young upstart team, or just a team that that was kind of written off a little bit. So I kind of like that aspect of the West. These games, both these series, I think they're really interesting. I think they're both going to be back and forth. I could see any of these teams really winning it. But you talked about that Clippers Jazz game. My takeaway, actually, even with the Jazz win, I'm more confident in the Clippers than I was going into the series because I expected the Jazz to take game one. You talked about the fatigue. I really thought that would play a role. Jazz are going 6 days, without playing. So I thought that they'd be well rested. The Clippers obviously had to fight for everything to beat the Mavericks in 7. And even with that, and with Paul George struggling the way he did, and with Donovan Mitchell dropping 45, the Clippers had a shot at the end of the game to tie it. And that's really all you could ask for in a Utah environment where those fans were loud last night. I was
Oh yeah.
producer Alex. I was like, wow, like I could really feel these fans. I've never really heard of Utah fans being that passionate or that loud, but they were last night. And so I give them credit there. But I do like the Clippers to win that series. I think it'll be interesting. But Donovan Mitchell, what he did last night, Brian, I want to hear what you think, because I think one of my big takeaways from these playoffs is his kind of ascension from a star to a superstar. And I am confident saying that. Yesterday he tied Karl Malone's record for most 40-point playoff games in Jazz history. He's 24 years old. So the sky really is the limit for him. He has stepped up in the biggest moments. I remember last year in the bubble versus the Nuggets, he was everything they could have asked for. Right now he is. So I think this will be a back and forth series. I expect them to take at least 2, even though they're already up 1-0. I expect the Clippers to bounce back in game 2. We'll see what happens there. But I'm having a really fun time, Brian, just watching these games out west because these teams are fighting for everything. And there's not one team that is really blowing everyone else out of the water.
Oh, absolutely. And in this series, I could really see it going either way. I mean, which is crazy to say with, how we were all feeling about the Clippers after they lost the first 2 games to Dallas, but they've really rebounded nicely and have really put themselves in a good position to be taken seriously by the NBA and the fans in general. And I really think that, if they can just regroup from this, they shouldn't have any problem. And I definitely think game 2 will be more telling because, there was, the Clippers could be fatigued coming into this one. The Jazz haven't played in 6 days. They were really rusty at the start. They could not hit a shot in the first half. It seemed that way. And I really think, game 2, both these teams will have a game under their belt. And I think that this could be an excellent series and this could really go either way. And that's what I love about the West. In the East, you have, okay, the Sixers are heavily favored. The Nets are heavily favored, not in the West. I mean, the West really, any of these teams could have a shot to get out of the conference. And that's what's so interesting to me. And, the Jazz are a great team. And I think people don't give them enough credit. They play great defense. And as you say, they have star players in Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. And Donovan Mitchell put on a show and it was tremendous to watch. And I'm just really interested. The Jazz, they could be good players. Also could be key players in the Western Conference. We have the Nuggets and the Suns, and the Suns are up 1-0 in that series with a 122-105 win the other night. And I have to say, I don't know about you, Ryan, but I really like the Suns, especially after watching this game. We saw them take down the LA Lakers in the first round, and this game 1, it really showed they have a deep team, and it wasn't just one person really kind of taking over and scoring all the points. There was really an all-around effort, and I thought they did a great job. And I really think that, in my opinion, I think they're going to be the ones to come out of the West.
Yeah, a second ago when I was breaking down the West, I stopped myself from saying I could see all four of these teams in the finals because I can't see the Nuggets in the finals because I am
I
very
agree.
confident in the Suns, as you talked about. I feel the same exact way you did, similar to how I just talked about Donovan Mitchell, that transition from star to superstar. I saw the same exact thing in Devin Booker in these playoffs because he's put up the numbers every season, right? And the number one criticism from people, including me, was why does it matter? They're empty numbers on a bad team. And obviously, the bubble last year, 8-0, they had all the momentum. They go out, you give that front office a ton of credit, getting a guy like CP3, even with that contract. Many people are so skeptical, saying, how does this move the needle? And it clearly has. It's unlocked a new level in Devin Booker. When you're able to drop 47 in a closeout game versus the Lakers, versus the defending champs, I will give you that superstar status. He's averaged 28 these playoffs. And the Suns, as you talked about, it's not just him. It's a complete basketball team. They're able to take care of the Nuggets in game one with four guys in the 20-plus range. Mikal Bridges is an elite 3-and-D player in this league. Extremely, he's so useful. Every single team could use a Mikal Bridges in their starting lineup. And obviously you have CP3 who can close out any game if Devin Booker is getting doubled, isn't making his shots on the stretch. And then to have a guy like DeAndre Ayton, who I feel like gets a little too much hate because obviously, Luka Doncic was in the same draft. Many people thought they should have drafted him. They hired his head coach at the time. There was a lot of signs there. They go with DeAndre Ayton, and I feel like he's got a lot of flack just because he isn't Luka Doncic, but he's an outstanding big man. And when you have that presence down low, it opens up, what you can do on the 3-point line because you have to clog kind of the inside. So I really like the Suns also. CP3, he's never been to the finals before. This, I think, is his best shot. How awesome would it be, Brian, to see a Clippers CP3 reunion in the Western Conference Finals, the Clippers' first ever Western Conference Finals versus, their former franchise guy in Chris Paul? I think that would be a really interesting series. That's how I see it going. And I certainly do like the Suns to take care of the Nuggets here, but I can't take away from Nikola Jokic and what he did this year. The MVP of the league, completely deserving, lowest drafted MVP in league history. I know this is going around social media and stuff, but when he got drafted, there was a Taco Bell commercial airing. That's how insignificant
Yes.
and late in the draft it was. So I want to give props to him because not only was he able to win this year, but once Jamal Murray got hurt, my thing was, all right, let's wait and see because I was devastated with that injury. I thought the Nuggets did have a real chance at making a run here, and they were able to pick up the pace, 16-8 without him. They obviously just beat the Portland Trailblazers. They fought against the Suns. That series certainly isn't over, so I give them a ton of credit. But I do not think personally that they can beat the Suns or anyone in the West for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, the Jazz and the Clippers are really good, but the Suns, they have been playing their best basketball yet. And I really think their defense has also been playing really well. I mean, they really contained Jokic really well. You look at the numbers he was putting up in the Blazers series, he had five of the 6 games, he had over 30 points. And then last night they hold him to 22, and it really, really helped them. They went on that huge run, and I just really like the Suns, and Chris Paul being healthy is so important, and I really like this team. The Phoenix crowd is much like Utah, is also crazy, and it
They've
really
been
gives
waiting
them
for this.
this exactly. Yeah, they give them this home court advantage. The fans have been waiting for this, not only because of the pandemic, but the Suns really have not had much success in the last decade. So I really think with the depth this team has and the home court advantage and especially the production from their starting 5, I really think the Suns are a key player and could very easily make it out of the West, but we'll see going forward. Before we go to break, other than the postseason, there was other news that broke with Tom Thibodeau, head coach of the New York Knicks. He was named coach of the year, beating out the Suns coach Monty Williams, and who finished in second, and then Jazz Quinn Snyder finished in third. And we actually have a soundbite of Tom Thibodeau after receiving the Coach of the Year award. Take a listen.
It's an honor to obviously receive this award. I think this award reflects more of our group and our team and organization. Anytime someone gets recognized individually, it's usually a byproduct of the team winning and exceeding expectations. And most importantly, our players. We have a great group of players. They gave us everything they had. We're led by Julius Randle from the start of the season, but we have a great blend of players, guys like R.J. Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, Derrick Rose, Elfrid Payton, Alec Burks, Reggie Bullock. Nerlens Noel, and young guys like Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly. But everyone from top to bottom did an incredible job in giving us everything they had. In the 70s, I grew up watching Willis Reed and Walt Frazier, Dave DeBusschere, Red Holtzman. Those were my heroes. And then having the opportunity to come back here in the 90s with Jeff Van Gundy and that staff and Patrick Ewing and all the great players, Allen Houston, Larry Johnson, Oak, all those guys. I know what this team means to the city. So it's very meaningful.
Thibodeau, as we knew, was a front runner for this award with the total 180 that he did with the Knicks franchise. But a lot of people can make a case for Monty Williams with the work he did with the Suns. So, Ryan, I got to ask you, with Thibodeau winning the award, did the voters get this right?
Listen, I have a Knicks flag right behind me, so I'm certainly going to not disagree with Monty Williams, great season. You know, they're still playing for a reason. He's an awesome coach, did a great job in Phoenix. But what Tom Thibodeau did with the Knicks was just spectacular, because when you're projected to win 22, you shatter the expectations, right? You win 41 games, the biggest increase in the league from projected to actually wins. And the thing was, it wasn't like they added some superstar in the offseason. That was my only reason. Like, that was the reason I had him over Monty Williams, is because with Chris Paul's addition, how much of a factor did Chris Paul play? You know, with Tom Thibodeau, he played the most important role in this team getting better. Obviously, Julius Randle, we know his story, winning most improved player, took leaps and bounds in his second year with the Knicks. RJ Barrett went from kind of a shaky guy to a 40% three-point shooter and a legit number 2 for a playoff team, but especially on defense. And I think that's where you have to look at what Thibodeau did. And he's such a mastermind, because they're bottom 5 in basically every statistical defensive category last year. And with basically the same roster, they flipped it. They were top 5 in every category with the same guys. So what he was able to do, he spoke about, you know, the culture in New York City, what it meant. A match made in heaven. I'm so happy that Tom Thibodeau gets to coach the Knicks. Obviously a sour taste at the end of his mouth with the end of the season ending the way it did. But nevertheless, I think it's completely deserving. The voters got it right here, and I have no issue whatsoever.
I have to agree with you. I mean, it's hard to factor I think sometimes it's difficult when a lot of people factor, you know, the expectation teams had going into the season and using that to really determine the award. But I think regardless of that, you know, Thibodeau is very deserving of this award. And it's not that, you know, they did better than they expected. I mean, Thibodeau, you could just see it by watching these games. He really changed the culture of this team, the dynamic, the way that they played. I mean, he came in with young, unexperienced guys, and, you know, the Knicks were ranked towards the bottom of the power rankings, and all of a sudden they become this. So they didn't just, exceed expectations. They just blew them out of the water. And I really think that, you know, Tom Thibodeau, he really got this team right. And what he did is he turned this team from a team that, you know, didn't have anything going for it. And he really just turned this team into a winning, playoff contending team, a playoff formidable team. And I really think the voters did get this right. Congratulations to Tom Thibodeau. Well-deserved award. We're going to take a short break. Coming up next, the Yankees have been struggling over the last week. And what does it mean? Is it a long-term issue, or is it something they can fix? We'll talk about it after the break, but we're going to take a timeout for a little bit. But stay tuned to more 101 Nightly. Welcome back to One on One Nightly. Brian Raybacks alongside Ryan Gregware. And if you've been following New York sports and you've been invested in it, you have to have seen the total blow up in the media about how poorly the Yankees have been playing. And there's really there's no other way to say it. They have been not playing bad baseball. I mean, the last week has been pretty troubling. I mean, you even stemming from the sweep against Detroit, you've played some bad games against the Rays, but you split that series. And then the Red Sox series was so important, and they end up getting swept at home against the Red Sox for the first time in 10 years. And, they had an off day on Monday, and they got to play the Twins last night, and they won that game. But, there's still, even with the win, there is still some issues with this team, mainly on offense. And Ryan, I got to ask you, I mean, these issues on offense, do you think they're going to plague the Yankees long-term going forward, or is this something that they can just shake off and move on from?
Yeah, man, that's a loaded question there. One thing I'll say is last night, 14 hits. It looked like the offense for the first time, they were able to string some consecutive hits together. Still needed to get bailed out by some Twins errors, but the question you asked with the offense, it's a huge issue, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're 6.5 back right now. You're in third. You're lucky to be 3 games over 500. You really are, because this offense has just been pathetic. You're hitting 230, 22nd in the league, 20th in OPS. You're bottom 5 in runs, and this is kind of deflated numbers after you scored 8 runs yesterday. And all these numbers are the worst for a Yankee team since 1972. But the main issue with the Yankees is because it's not one snap your fingers, you see the issue, right? Because usually you'd be like, you look at how they performed, you'd say it's the strikeouts. But if you look at the strikeouts, the Rays have more strikeouts. They have the best record in the league. Then you could go to the 3 outcomes, right? Because the Yankees are such a walk, home run, K, one of those 3. But the teams that are all in the top 3 and that are all in the playoffs right now, Giants, Rays, and Brewers. So it's not that really. It's the runners in scoring position. They are not able to get timely hits. They are not able to move runners over. They play no situational baseball. And it's not one guy. There's one guy that is hitting, and it's Aaron Judge, who hit a home run today. They're up 2-0 early against the Twins. We'll see what happens there. The Twins are the team that the Yankees just always have their number. So, I texted our producer jokingly yesterday, the Yankees are back. I don't know if they're back yet, but if there's one team that gets them back, it is the Minnesota Twins. And the one guy I think who really needs to get going, and that was a bad way of phrasing it, the one guy who is expected to absolutely kill the ball and who isn't is DJ LeMahieu, because it obviously starts and stops with him. He's been the guy with runners in scoring position who's always got it done. And this year he hasn't got it done at all. He is the largest decrease in expected average from last year to this year. He had 360 last year. He's down to over 100 points this year at 256. But the power is completely gone, and the dead end balls, whatever it is, it's just non-existent. I was looking today because the slugging percentage was so bad. I wanted to see how it compared to kind of other really bad seasons on the Yankees, and it's literally the 9th lowest in team history slugging percentage. So you can't have that from your leadoff hitter, especially with the value of home runs today. Obviously, Gleyber Torres has also kind of lost his power here, only 3 home runs after 38 in 2019. And the lefties, too, that's another huge thing. They have gotten no production from their lefties this year. Jay Bruce is already retired. Brett Gardner is not the player he once was. He just isn't. They continue to trot him out there. It continues to not work. They dealt Mike Tauchman at the deadline. Aaron Hicks, lost season for him. So there's a lot of issues with the offense right now, a lot. That's not even mentioning a Clint Frazier, who's still under 200. That's not mentioning a Gary Sanchez, who still isn't back to his old form. Luke Voigt also injured. So when you combine all these things, you can see why the Yankees are where they are record-wise and why their offense isn't hitting the way they are. The reason that they're still even remotely competitive is because of the pitching. And I do think you need to shed some positive there, because I don't think people expected this pitching staff to be the staff it is, their 3rd best ERA pitching staff in the AL this season. Domingo Germán's really stepped up. Kluber, before the injury, was legit number 2. And obviously you have a guy like Cole. Jordan Montgomery is always going to give you innings. He's always going to fight. So I do think there's a little positive, but the offense is really where you have issues, Brian. And there's not one issue, as I talked about. Everyone has to get better. I think you also need to look outside the organization. They have to change something up, and they have to do it soon, because you cannot punt on series. The Tiger series infuriated me because it didn't seem like there was any urgency, right? They lose the first one. They lose a crusher on a walk-off home run, 1 strike away, and then they roll out an opener in game 3 and they get shelled. and it didn't look like there was any urgency. They come back, they get swept by the Red Sox at home after winning 12 straight in the Bronx versus them. So this team doesn't have the juice right now. It doesn't have the same energy it had in 2019 and the years prior, and they need to do something now because right now what they have in the lineup, it's just not hitting. Rougned Odor, he's a 160 hitter. It's not going to cut it anymore. They need to cut bait. They need to figure out how they can get guys who are going to produce in the lineup.
I mean, yeah, there's not really a ton of ways you can sugarcoat it. I mean, this team really has not been playing good baseball, and you're absolutely right with the offense, the top 5 guys in the order, they've been producing a little bit in terms of like getting base hits, but getting on base isn't the problem. The issue is the hitting with runners on base. And it's just been terrible, really, in the last week and a half that it's been. It's just been so frustrating. I mean, you can see the big Derek Jeter picture behind me. I'm a big Yankee fan, and it's just been so frustrating to watch. And just it's not only the fact that they're losing, it's just the fact that they're losing. And the thing that was supposed to be their strength coming into this season, which is the offense, it just hasn't been there. I mean, they don't rank high in really any offensive category in the league. And the whole problem I have is in 2019, when balls were flying out of the ballpark like crazy, this team was, really built as a home run hitting team. And that was their go-to, the home run. They almost lived and died by the home run. But now this year, when you take away the home run, they're not doing a whole lot. Now, I mean, they had some big hits last night and some home runs. Gary Sanchez and Miguel Andujar both went yard, but really and Aaron Judge tonight, I should say, but there really hasn't been a ton of, long ball production, and, they're not getting that many extra base hits, and it's just a problem. And they don't play small ball either. Now, they did have a couple of sacrifice bunts last night, but you need to see more of that. I need to see more of that going forward. Now, I'm not saying that you have to, play like it's little league where you need to just move every runner over everywhere you can, but you need to do that to some extent. You can't just, try to hit the ball out of the ballpark all the time and ultimately just not work. And you can't just strike out I shouldn't say strike out, but it's just so frustrating to watch this team not live up to their potential. And I just don't really know where to pinpoint the issue as to whose fault it is, really, whether it's, do you blame Aaron Boone? Do you blame Brian Cashman? It's a confusing situation with the Yankees for sure.
Well, I kind of disagree with you at that point because in 2019, the 3 years prior, I had no problems with the home runs, right? The offense wasn't holding the Yankees back. They didn't have the pitching. They go out, they finally get the ace, which they never had in Garrett Cole. And then last year they had nothing after him. Tanaka got shelled. They needed Jordan Montgomery, who at that point was not really proven, coming off Tommy John, to pitch an elimination game. They just simply weren't as good as the Rays. But you look at like the teams who hit home runs win. The Rays are hitting the most home runs that are winning. The Dodgers last year hit the most home runs. They won the World Series. So like, I don't have an issue with, ditching the small ball approach with bunting and stuff like that. You just need to produce. It's that simple. If you're hitting home runs with guys on base, there's no issue. Giancarlo Stanton just did that. He had a 3-run homer. It's 5-0 right now. They had a stretch. I don't know if it's been broken. They went like a month without more than a solo home run. All their home runs were solo for like a month straight this year. So like, you're not getting guys on base. You're just not producing. I don't think it's about, like, obviously they have to change their, their approach and the roster construction because you need lefties in this lineup, especially with Yankee Stadium. And we'll see what they do with the deadline in that sense. So that's certainly an area you can pinpoint. You can blame the roster construction. You can blame Cashman on that. But like the Aaron Boone thing, it's weird because he gives these answers after the game. It's the same ticky-tacky stuff about how the guys in the lineup have to produce. He'll be like, we saw some good today when they get shelled, stuff like that. And it's frustrating answers. But at the same time, like, what's he going to do? Because the guys just aren't hitting. You have to give up, though, at the same point on Rougned Odor, and you got to give Andujar the bat every single day because he's really come alive lately. Gary Sanchez, too, he's hit 367 in his last, since early May. He's not in the lineup today. They go personal catcher with Kyle Higashioka. That's a little frustrating. I'd like to see Gary Sanchez get a chance to get hot, and it's just consistency like that. But there is no one area. It's not like they have one position where they need to upgrade. It's not like they're missing that ace to get them over the top. It's just the production from the guys that have produced. You need Clint Frazier to get back to last year's form. You need Gleyber Torres to get the power he lost. You need DJ LeMahieu to start hitting like DJ LeMahieu. And until that happens, there's not much they can do. They have to get these guys to produce, and you can fill in anywhere. I don't know with the luxury tax if that's going to be a hurdle. I really hope it's not. It can't be. You have to get past that. And so, help is on the way if they need it. I do believe that Brian Cashman is willing to make a move, but these guys that they have invested in, they need to produce, and it's not one of them. It's really everyone besides Aaron Judge, who I think does deserve a lot of credit. What he's doing this year would be MVP numbers in most years. You obviously have the Shohei Ohtanis of the world, who you can't, when you're pitching lights out and you're hitting, you can't top that if you're Aaron Judge. So I do, give him credit for kind of carrying the lineup here, but the offense needs to get better. It's been the strength of this team. It needs to continue to be the strength because I don't know if the pitching can hold up. It's not like they have all these proven guys. Domingo Germán, while, he's an 18-game winner in 2019, he's not a known commodity in this league yet. He's still too inexperienced. Jordan Montgomery is still a mixed bag. Luis Severino, you don't know when he's coming back. I know he's working on his way. And so with Corey Kluber injured, you don't know if the rotation's going to hold up. You expect some regression there, and that's where you need the offense to pick up. One thing we haven't mentioned with the offense, which is so weird, is they have not won a single slugfest this year. They're 0-17 when the opposing team scores 5 or more runs. You'd expect the complete opposite from this team because that's what they've been doing. They'd slug their way to wins, and this year it has not happened one time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a multitude of different issues that has caused the Yankees to be in 4th place and 6.5 games out on June 9th. It's frustrating, and I think additions need to be made, whether 2 interesting names I see are Ketel Marte or David Peralta from the Diamondbacks. I think those 2 would be interesting pieces, especially with the lack of production they're getting in the outfield and bringing in lefty bats. But yeah, it's been frustrating, and you can't really sugarcoat it. The Yankees need to get better. Across town, the Mets have actually been playing pretty well despite the injuries, and we'll take a short break, and we'll bring in Dylan Balsamo to talk more Mets after this. Stay tuned. We are back here on 101 Nightly. Before we get into the Mets, I need to give a quick Islanders update. They are in Game 6 against the Bruins, and they're up 4-1 with 2 minutes and 9 seconds to go in the second period. The Islanders, with the win, will clinch the series and go on to the semifinals against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And they're in a good position right now. And we'll be talking to Mike Messina later on in the show about the Islanders and how they're favoring in the postseason. So stay tuned for that. But right now, we have Dylan Balsamo to talk some Mets. Dylan, how are you doing?
What's going on, guys? Good to see you. I love one-on-one nightly. It's one of my favorite things we do here at WFUV. So I'm glad to hop on even just for a segment.
It's great to have you. And, you know, we were talking about the Yankees, about how they have not been doing well, but the Mets have actually, they've stayed afloat, and they are a first place team. They're in first place in the National League East still, even with all the injuries. And I think now with them getting some of their hitters back, Pete Alonso's been back and he's been hitting well. I really think that the Mets, they've been doing a good job. And right now they're beating up on the Baltimore Orioles 8-1. They face Matt Harvey again. And they've really just taken over in that game, rebounded from last night's kind of disaster. And, it's been interesting to see how the Mets have been able to stay afloat, but somehow, some way, even with all the injuries, even with, Billy McKinney having to play in the outfield, they've managed to get the job done.
Absolutely. And, in terms of last night, even the best teams lose 60 games. So that's just bound to happen along the way, even if one of them is against the Baltimore Orioles. But anyways, you talk about being a first place team in spite of a multitude of injuries. And that's a combination of two things. For one thing, the National League East, in terms of not the Mets, has been incredibly disappointing this year in what I suspected was going to be the best division in baseball. Obviously, the National League West has proven me wrong in that respect. But, you look at a team like the Braves, were obviously the favorite to win the division. I personally had the Phillies as maybe bettering the Mets come the season's end. And perhaps that might still be true. But even the Marlins have a good squad. The Nationals have a decent squad. So the division was supposed to be good, but it's not. But the other thing that has benefited the Mets is there clearly is some kind of spirit on this team that is undescribable, that is not tangible in any kind of statistic. Every one of these guys has said, Michael Conforto was the most recent one just a couple days ago, saying this is the most special team he's ever been a part of. There's something there. There's a spirit, there's a feeling there. And perhaps that comes from an incredible amount of injuries and feeling a closeness as a team. Maybe the momentum and resiliency of someone like Kevin Pillar coming back after maybe a week and a half on the IL after literally breaking his nose. All of these different things clearly come in to benefit the Mets. So that has very much played well in their hand this year.
That's so interesting because you talked about there's no tangible aspect, and there really isn't. Like, as I was doing research for the show, I was looking at the lineup. Is there one guy who's really carrying the load? And there just isn't. Like, Dom Smith is 260 average. I think that's best for the team. Steve Cohen had a tweet the other day. I think it's such a perfect way to emphasize the team. It's like, you just got to love this team. They continue to find a way to get it done. There's no one tangible thing that they're really, dominating right now. It's just a team. You talked about Conforto saying that he was on a World Series team. For him to say like this is the most special it's been is really something. The thing I want to ask you is about the rotation, because right now they do have the best three-headed kind of monster in baseball. DeGrom, obviously, we could do a whole show on his dominance. Marcus Stroman, we knew he'd kind of be solid. And Taijuan Walker's kind of came out of nowhere, 2.17 ERA, really a great free agent signing. Do you think that they can kind of keep this steady in the rotation? I know David Peterson struggled yesterday. I think he will stay in the rotation. It's kind of shaky there. But do you think the rotation can continue to be such a strength for this team?
Well, it's an interesting question, Ryan, because you look at the three-headed monster that it is right now, DeGrom and Stroman and Taijuan Walker, surprisingly. I have as much faith in Jacob DeGrom as I do in any religious figure that has ever been known on this planet. Marcus Stroman has been stellar, and it's very clear that the team and the fan base is behind him all the way. So I have as much faith in him as I do anybody as well. Taijuan Walker, I'm not incredibly sure about, and it doesn't feel completely there to me yet. And maybe he'll prove me wrong. I would love for him to prove me wrong. But to that point, not yet. But then you look at the rest of this team, what Mets fans have been saying the entire season is, wow, look at how good this pitching has been in even the bullpen. Plus, Noah Syndergaard's not back yet. Cookie Carrasco has not played an inning for the Mets yet. I don't know if Noah Syndergaard's coming back this year. It just might not happen. I don't know if Carrasco's going to be coming back this year. That's a big setback from just today.
Yeah.
But, those three, as long as they can each have their points of staying consistent throughout the season, DeGrom is, if he keeps up like this, I don't even know. He'll have to pitch all 9 innings of the All-Star game for the National League if he keeps up like this, quite frankly. Stroman will continue to have ups and downs as he always does. But, there's guys like David Peterson who can come in and be that temporary third guy if you need him to. This is a team that has pitched a lot of bullpen games, as we've started to call them, with an opener and just having long rotation guys. But this is a team that has what's the word? Not levity. That's not the word. The depth. That's not even close to levity. But I thought of it eventually. This is a team that has the depth in the bullpen as well to support a starting staff, even when they're not at their best. So I have full faith in the Mets pitching staff to sustain them to be at playoff caliber if the offense allows them to be for the remainder of the season.
Yeah. And I think the most interesting thing about the Mets, or the most fascinating thing, is that Francisco Lindor is hitting around 215 and they're still managing to be a first place team. Like you have your best hitter not hitting and they're still managing to get the job done. And the other important thing is that they're getting their pieces back. Conforto is going to come back. McNeil's going to come back. JD Davis is going to come back. So the Mets, if they can just survive this crisis, I really think they could be in a good position. But we were talking about the pitching staff and, you have the three-headed monster, but I think, with the two guys, Peterson and Lucchesi not really being sure things, I have to ask you, Dylan, could perhaps, a trade at the deadline be in the works?
Brian, that's a good question. And it's something I've given some thought to. And that's the really unfortunate thing of having this many injuries, because a fully healthy Mets roster, there's easily a trade you could make. But as of right now, it might actually be too early. For any team, it's too early. It's too early for the Mets to be thinking about that because they do not know what pieces they're going to have come the end of July, the beginning of August. As much as we like to talk about how Conforto's on his way back, JD Davis is on his way back, and don't really know about Jeff McNeil or Brandon Nimmo for that sake. We at the end of the day, we don't know yet. And like we talked about, the pieces that were supposed to be the center of things for the Mets have really not been. That goes to show that their success is as much confusing as it is magical, it seems to me. Lindor has struggled and, he's been on a tear the last week or so, but that doesn't make up for a whole month and a half where he just wasn't hitting. Pete Alonso has a home run and 3 RBIs at home this year. He's hitting 0.91, I think is his average at home this year. Dom Smith went weeks without hitting a home run. There are pieces there that are supposed to be producing that aren't there yet. So, you look at the Mets, and if there's anything that could be traded, it's one of these guys who has come in and produced out of nowhere, whether that be, McKinney, who has come in recently and just blown the roof off the place. Has become
got a home run tonight.
Team immediately. Khalil Lee is a great player who is obviously not on the major league roster right now, but I think is excellent trade bait if you need another arm on the staff. But I also think there are some guys in that bullpen who could make the transition to the starting rotation if you need to come down the stretch. So to be honest with you, this is a very long way of saying I don't know.
Well, we'll see what the Mets do going forward. The Mets are now up 10-1 on the Orioles. Kevin Pillar and Mason Williams, both home runs in the top of the 8th inning. Kevin Pillar's had some night. The Mets are in first place in the National League East, 29-24. And, they're going to get their big guns get back, and we'll see. Dylan, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Always a pleasure, guys. Really, truly.
Pleasure to have you. So we will take a break. Coming up next, Julio Jones traded to the Tennessee Titans. Do we like it? How do we feel about it? And what does it mean for Tennessee going forward? We'll discuss it next on 101 Nightly. Welcome back to One-on-One Nightly, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Ryan Raybacks alongside Ryan Greg Ware. Ryan, can we call it a blockbuster deal? Because, I mean, we anticipated this coming for, a handful of weeks now, and now it's finally happened. The Titans have acquired Julio Jones from the Atlanta Falcons, along with a 2023 sixth-round pick. In exchange, the Falcons receive a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 fourth-round pick. So Julio Jones is now a Tennessee Titan. He joins a receiver core with A.J. Brown and an offense that also sports Derrick Henry. The Titans, they look really good now coming into the season. But, Ryan, I got to ask for your thoughts on this trade. Do you like it or not?
Yeah, so the question, I look at it different ways because the move itself, I don't think is necessarily bad, but I see this as an absolute non-zero plus for the Titans. I really do. I don't think this moves any needle. I don't think this makes them any better. I don't think this helps them win any more than they did last year. I really don't. And that's because when you look at this team, the offense is not what was holding them back. So obviously, the one thing I'll say is you lose 192 targets in the offseason with Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, and Johnny Smith. So it's nice to get Julio to replace that. And I think in the regular season, it'll be good because you don't have to keep as much stress on Derrick Henry. If you're at Titans, you probably don't want him rushing for 2,000 yards again, because that means you just feed him the ball so much and you got to preserve him a little. But the reason that the Titans can't get over that hump and can't make that next step is because the defense, and they are not able to get after the quarterback at all. They were tied with the Lions last year for the lowest pass rush rate in the NFL, And in the secondary, it's even worse. They allowed the second most passing touchdowns to those same Lions. And what they did to address those issues, they signed Bud Dupree, who on its own isn't really proven. We know he can rack up sacks, but that's when he has the help of the TJ Watt getting double teams, when he has a Cam Hayward and a Stephon Tuitt clogging the inside. And so the reason I bring this up and the reason I'm going to get into their secondary now is because those are the issues the Titans have to go after. Those are what they should spending their second rounders on if they're willing to deal them. Not a guy in Julio Jones who, yes, it makes their offense super fun. I know I've seen all those pictures around the big three with Derrick Henry, Julio, A.J. Brown, the who's stopping this offense. And I feel like every time we get those, it's always themselves. And I think the defense is going to be what's holding them back. In the secondary, it's even worse because your number one corner is a 32-year-old Janoris Jenkins, who was the number one option, who's now the number one. It's on his third team in 3 years. And you have a rookie as the number two. So the Titans secondary is not good. The pass rush is very suspect. It was the worst in football last year. And with those issues, I don't see how a move for a 32-year-old receiver who just missed 7 games last year is going to move any needle. Like, is it a nice piece? Yes. Is it going to hurt them? Not at all. But this is not going to help them win games. Second-round picks are valuable. I wouldn't, if I was going to trade a second-round pick for the Titans, I would use it on the defense because that's what needs the most help. That's how they are going to get to the next level and be legit contenders.
Well, I mean, yeah, the defense it's not exactly perfect, and sure, there are some shortcomings on it, but I personally see this as a complete win for the Titans. I mean, I think this was a really good move. Now, I mean, they obviously have the most dangerous offense in the league. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones just immediately became the best wide receiver duo in the league. And I don't think it's really close. But I mean, the big thing here is that, Julio Jones, we all know his talents. He is a tremendous player and has been a consistently great receiver for so long. And they really didn't give up anything for him. I mean, they take on his contract, which is a hefty one. But, if you're telling me you're giving up a second round pick for a top receiver in the league, I mean, I have to view that as a win. You're just adding him to a roster without really sacrificing anything. So I really think that this move is great for the Titans, and I see them as the AFC South favorites. Now, it really just becomes, can they compete with, the Buffalo Bills or especially the Kansas City Chiefs? But I really think this was a good move for the Titans. They really are stacked now on offense. They're loaded. As you mentioned, they can take the workload off of Derrick Henry, and the defense may be a question mark, but it might not matter if you can just outscore everybody every week.
Well, you talked about only giving up a second rounder, and I think that's really telling because everybody knew Julio was on the move, right? It's not like this came out of nowhere. This was expected. This has been drawn out for the last 2 weeks. Remember, he went on undisputed on that phone call, Shannon Sharp. He openly said, yeah, I'm out of there. So, like, we knew he wanted out. And the fact that the bidding war and all it took was a second, I think it is telling for what teams kind of view. Obviously, Julio's been fantastic, 13K yards in his career. He's definitely a Falcons legend. You can't dispute that. But he is 32 coming off a hamstring injury. And if you just look at it objectively, 32-year-old receivers coming off an injury, I mean, they don't always come back. I know we've seen in recent years the price for these star receivers has been a 1, but that's for younger guys. Stephon Diggs was 26 into that trade. Odell was still on his rookie contract, or he just signed his second deal. So those were younger guys getting dealt. Julio, the 32, you can't ignore that. And production does fall off at some point. I don't think it's going to necessarily fall all the way off, but I don't think this moves a needle when the defense is so bad, right? It's not like this defense is average. Like the Chiefs, I'd say, have an average defense, and they can withstand that with kind of, their offensive firepower and Mahomes and all that. But the Titans defense is a legit weakness. And I don't know how it's going to just get better like this. The Bud Dupree signing, as I said, I don't think that solves all their issues. The cornerback room, you have to look at that as a huge weakness. And in this league, you can't just win on offense. You need to have a good defense because you say they can score every time. Do you really believe that? I know Ryan Tannehill puts up the stats, but do you really believe he can keep up with Mahomes in a playoff game? We've seen him fail in the past, and that reason they lost that game was because they could not stop Mahomes. And I think that is what we'll see with the Titans. I think the Colts, you talked about the AFC South, have a more complete team. As long as Carson Wentz can get back to somewhat of his recent form, I could see them being, I think they still are the favorites in that division barely because they have, the O-line, the D-line, they have the defense to compete. And I think you need the well-roundedness of your football team because shootouts aren't going to cut it all the ways. Your offense is going to have off games. You're going to need your defense to get stops. And I don't trust the Titans to do that, which is why I can't look at this move as making the Titans Super Bowl contenders. That's, I guess, my number one takeaway because, Julio is still awesome and stuff like that. I don't want to call him a bad player or anything. I just don't think this move pushes the needle in a direction where I see the Titans as a legit Super Bowl champion. And when you're trading for a 32-year-old Hall of Fame receiver, I feel like that's what should be the goal. And I don't think you can look at it as being that in Tennessee.
Well, the Titans' goal is clearly to win. They want to win a Super Bowl. The question is, can they get past the Chiefs? Can they get past Buffalo? And can this put them over the top? You mentioned the shortcomings on defense. I think the Bud Dupree assignment was great, but yes, there are holes in the secondary. I mean, Janoris Jenkins as your top option. That's, especially at this point in his career, it's not great. But I will say that, if you give Ryan Tannehill another weapon, and especially with Julio Jones, he usually gets doubled a lot. And, if you just take the pressure off of A.J. Brown, this could be one of the best offenses in recent memory. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm really excited to see how this works out for the Titans and what they do in the 2021 season and see how they go from there. We have more Aaron Rodgers news. Aaron Rodgers is back in the headlines again, and this time it's because he did not report to mandatory minicamp, and that's the big thing. He didn't go to OTAs. It's whatever. It literally has optional in the name, so he didn't have to do that. Whatever. But now he's missing mandatory camp, and they're really in a standoff. And I was an advocate for the longest time of, yeah, but it's fine. Aaron Rodgers, he's not going anywhere. But now Aaron Rodgers is officially a holdout, and these two, the front office and Aaron Rodgers, they cannot get on the same page. And I'm kind of questioning, where Aaron Rodgers is going to end up this season now after, thinking he's just going to be a Packer for life.
Yeah, you talked about they're not on the same page. I think at this point the book has been thrown out.
I
was in the same belief as you, as it'll blow over. They'll figure it out. They'll restructure it. And it's not necessarily that I expected him to show up to ODAs or mandatory minicamp. It's just the way his stance hasn't changed once. He's really like, no, I mean it. I am done with the Packers. I will not play another game with them. And Rodgers is the kind of guy, like if you look into his personality, I believe him. I really do think he would be willing to sit out a season at 38 years old, he doesn't have many years left. I think he'd be willing to sit out a season to prove this point. He is a guy who likes to be proven right. He's a little bit of stubborn, not necessarily a bad thing. It gives him an edge. It has certainly helped him throughout his career, but I don't think he's going to back down to anyone. I don't think Matt Murphy, kind of the head of football operations, is going to be the guy he caves to when he's asked for, not really much in Green Bay, right? They draft a quarterback in the first round last year. We know all about that. Obviously, he doesn't love that. He wants the new deal after winning MVP. They can't come to terms, and that's where things completely break off. That's where he's all the way out. And so if you're the Packers right now, what do you do? Because you don't want to be the team that trades Aaron Rodgers and then you see him with the Lombardi. But at the same time, what other options you have? You have Jordan Love. I think it's really interesting now in minicamp. I think it is kind of a good thing that he's not there right now, only because they can see what they have in Jordan Love, right? He's such a question mark. He was so raw coming out of college that we didn't know. And now they're getting a chance to see him with the ones, with the main reps. And I think that can only be a good thing, because let's say that Jordan Love has all the talent in the world. Let's say he is ready. I think they can feel a little bit better about dealing Rodgers, because at least they have the replacement in place. It's very similar to what happened when Rodgers took over with Favre. And that obviously, had its bumps along the way with Favre and the Packers relationship. But at the end of the day, Rodgers rewarded the Packers with the Super Bowl. Should have been much more, but that's not really on him. So I do think this is an interesting story. I don't think he's going to budge. I really don't. But I don't know if the Packers are. I think it's a game of, poker right now. They're playing chess. I don't know what they're doing. I don't see the situation updating. This is only an update because the dates that we had circled are now X's, right?
Yes.
And so it's not like there's a new development in it. It's just Rodgers is doing what he's been saying, and the Packers aren't budging. So I don't know where we go from here. I don't know if they deal him. There's still so much time before the season. But yeah, it looks like he really is committed to this holdout.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how both sides literally, they won't give in. They know what they want, and they're just standoffing each other, and it's crazy. And Jordan Love at camp, he's opening eyes. He is impressing people when he's running with the ones, and it makes you think, if the Packers see that Jordan Love actually could be the real deal, then what's the point of fixing the situation with Aaron Rodgers? If you have a young guy who can give more years than Rodgers, they probably don't want to fix the situation. And certainly Aaron Rodgers does not. He's made that very clear. So I don't know. At this point, it's very tough to judge. It's very tough to see where this is going, but I can't say it looks great for Packers fans that Aaron Rodgers will be a Packer in the foreseeable future. I mean, no one's budging. No one's giving up their ground. It's a tough situation, and they just can't get on the same page. And that has to worry you if you're a fan of the Green Bay Packers. If you're a fan of the New York Islanders, you have to be feeling great, up 4-1 going into the third period. We're about to bring in Mike Messina to talk some Islanders hockey, and we'll be right back with Islanders hockey after the break on 101 Nightly. Welcome back to One on One Nightly, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Brian Raybacks, Ryan Gregware, and now Mike Messina joining us to talk about the Islanders, who are up 4-1 against the Boston Bruins in Game 6 of their series, and they lead 3-2, and they're in a good position, I would say, to clinch this and move on to the next round. And, you know, Mike, we haven't had the pleasure. We've been doing the show for the last hour. We haven't had the pleasure to tune into this game. So really, what have you seen tonight? What have the Islanders done to really get this far ahead of the Bruins?
Guys, thanks for having me on 101 Nightly. It's a pleasure to be here. I haven't seen you guys or talked to you guys in a while, so I'm happy to be here. Semyon Varlamov, the Islanders goaltender, has been lights out tonight. 20 saves so far on 21 shots. He has really been the backbone of this team since the playoffs have started, and that doesn't stop tonight. The Islanders have been doing a little back and forth goaltending situation. One game playing Ilya Sorokin, next game playing Varlamov, and it was kind of confusing because neither could really get in a groove on what they wanted to do for the game, and it just really wasn't working out for them. But Islanders head coach Barry Trotz has stuck with Varlamov now for, I believe, 3 games in a row, and it has seriously worked out for them. Tonight, Brock Nelson comes off, has 2 goals. One was a goal where he charged the net, pretty much got the puck out of Tuukka Rask's glove himself, scored it right there. So Brock Nelson and Semyon Varlamov have kind of been the stones for the Islanders going into tonight.
I want to ask you about Game 5 because I feel like that was really the turning point. You know, the Bruins, they outplayed them, right? They outshot them 44-19. And when you lose a game at home doing that, it's a real killer. And obviously there was some power play stuff with the refs. You know, I'll go into Bruce Cassidy in a second. But do you think that was really the turning point in the series? Assuming the Islanders close it out here, you know, able to steal that game in Boston, what did that do for the momentum going into this one?
Oh, it was everything. They had no purpose to even win that game, like you said, Ryan, with the shots compared to what the Islanders had. They had no purpose to win, and then being able to steal that game in Boston to bring it back to the Coliseum. I mean, if they don't win tonight, well, if they weren't in a 4-1 situation right now to win tonight and it went back to the Garden, this series would have been over, in my opinion. I don't think the Bruins are coming into Long Island, taking a game, then going back to the Garden and letting the Islanders take a Game 7 from there. So Game 5 was pretty much the turning point of this series, and like a lot of fans have been saying, that's exactly what they've wanted to see. Islanders needed to come and take that game. They did. They took another game 2. So taking those 2 games at TD Garden has been huge for them and kind of brought them to this point where they can close it out in 6, which no one really expected them to do.
Well, yeah, building off of that, you know, the Islanders, they had a year last year where they went to the Eastern Conference Finals and found their way back into the playoffs this year. But there were some question marks coming in. But I got to ask you, you know, with the Islanders in a position to clinch, did you really expect this type of playoff success, especially, you know, going up against opponents like the Penguins and the Bruins?
Yes, I did expect this kind of success, but I personally didn't think they would make it past this series and past the Boston Bruins. The Bruins are a much better team than them, in my opinion. They have skaters that can skate faster, shoot better, and just do more on the ice as a whole. And Tuukka Rask, in my opinion, is a better goaltender than Semyon Varlamov. So all in all, the Boston Bruins should be winning the series and should win the series completely, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen right now with the 4-1 lead for the Islanders. But really what helped them out along this run was their 2 trade deadline acquisitions, Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. I mean, they really didn't give up much for either one of them. They gave up a first round, a 4th and a conditional, and 2 prospects that you never really know what prospects are going to give you until they come up and actually play in the big league. So to be able to get these 2 guys who both have a goal tonight, by the way, Palmieri and Zajac both scored tonight, which has been huge. They've been doing that since they got here, since the trade deadline. And those 2 have really been a huge piece in this playoff run. And as much as people count the Islanders out year after year, they show up game after game after game and prove everyone wrong and prove that they belong to be here and they deserve to be in this spotlight and deserve to have a Game 6 at Nassau Coliseum tonight and beating a team like the Boston Bruins who could have overmatched them in every asset of the game.
Yeah, I think that speaks to Barry Trotz. You know, they hit hard, they score, and they need to. They're well coached. And I want to talk about, you know, the coaching here because Bruce Cassidy had a comment the other day. I'm sure, you know, you talked about it on your podcast, where the New York Saints comment, he got fined $25,000. I know there's that argument where, you know, people look at how these teams played this season Islanders were bottom 3 in penalties all year. Bruins were top 5 in penalties. So you could look at it that way as, well, obviously, the Islanders aren't getting penalized. That's what they've been doing. But what do you think about the fine? Do you think that the comment was worthy of that? I know that there was some controversy there and just the whole aspect.
I think Bruce Cassidy's comments are fine. There was no disrespect intended towards the referees. He said that he knows them personally and that it's a great crew out there. They just need to work on things. And I know personally when people tell me I need to work on things, I'm like, all right, let me get better and let me learn how to do something better than how I'm performing. And I don't think the fine makes any sense to fine a head coach $25,000 for just voicing his opinion, because essentially one of the calls kind of lost them the game there with that slashing call. So, I mean, is it a huge deal, $25,000? No, but I see no reason for him to even get that fine. I mean, I feel like he had a little chip on his shoulder because Barry Trotz in his press conference mentioned that the refs need to keep an eye out on Patrice Bergeron at the faceoff circle because he cheats a little bit, and then he got taken out of the faceoff circle 4 straight in the first period in Game 5. So I feel like he had a little chip on his shoulder going into that as well. But the comments themselves, they're harmless. He's speaking the truth. They need work. And I feel like the fine is just unprecedented and not needed, but that's sort of the road the NHL goes down. They fine a lot of coaches and players for comments they make about officials and referees. And if that's the route they want to take, so be it. But it has to be consistent throughout the league, and it really hasn't been.
Mike, I'll ask you one more question before we let you go. I mean, it's been a pretty controversial subject. I mean, a lot of people have been vocal about, the officiating in this series, especially in the last couple of games with, Game 5 and Game 4. And I got to ask you, do you kind of fall around the same way? I mean, do you think the officiating has really played that much of a role in this series as people are saying?
Yes and no. In Game 5 specifically, absolutely. That is really the reason why the outcome was the way it was. I mean, the shots compared, the Bruins shots 40-something compared to the Islanders 19. It really should not even be a close game. And the refs gave the Bruins a slashing penalty, and the Islanders scored right on that power play, and that was pretty much the end of the game right there. The Bruins really never looked. The Islanders never looked back. So I mean, yes, but all in all, I mean, they're humans and they make mistakes. It's a fast-paced moving game. We all know that. And for them to make mistakes is okay, but for them to make consistent mistakes for one team and not for the other, give certain teams calls and not the others, and make up calls and stuff like that, there's really no excuse for it. And I mean, I feel like we're at a point in life where referees, umpires, and people like that shouldn't be in charge of really where the game goes and the outcome of the game. And I definitely think moving forward, there needs to be some rules put in place that can make that not happen. I personally don't know what they could be, but the referee situation needs to get better in all ways, and not just hockey, but I think in all sports. And I don't see it really getting better anytime soon unless there's drastic changes.
Yeah. Islanders have the lead in the third period. A win will help them advance into the next round and win this series. Mike, thank you so much for coming on with us. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, man. It was great to be here. I haven't seen you guys in a while. I can't wait to get back to campus and finally be able to do this in person, hopefully.
Of course. We'll look forward to it. That wraps up our hockey segment here on 101 Nightly. Coming up next, we're about to wrap up the show with some Floyd Mayweather, Logan Paul. What do we think of that fight? We're about to wrap up the show on 101 Nightly. Welcome back to One on One Nightly. Brian Raybacks and Ryan Gregware about to wrap up the show, but we're not done just yet. Before we get into these other topics, the Yankees are exploding on offense tonight. 8-1 in the fifth inning. Giancarlo Stanton has 2 home runs. He's 3 for 3, 5 RBIs. Judge is homered as well as Miguel Andujar. It seems that they're finding their home run stroke again. Let's see if they can continue it. And the Mets just wrapped up. Final score 14-1 in Baltimore. What a night. Pete Alonso, 3 more hits. He's been really hot. And just a explosive night on offense in New York baseball. Ryan, I don't know if you got a chance to watch this Floyd Mayweather Logan Paul fight. I'm sure you did.
Oh, I did.
Most of us have, unfortunately, because I was really disappointed in this fight. Not that it was a great fight on paper. It's the best fighter in the world against Logan Paul. But I mean, this was just so boring in my opinion, and just it dragged for so long, and it was anticlimactic because it was just an exhibition. I didn't really enjoy it much at all.
Well, yeah, I was looking forward to this so much. I thought that Logan Paul was going to shock the world. I thought that I feel like going into the fight, like, didn't know really what to expect if we're being honest, but I kind of like feel like once you take a step back, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This was legalized bank robbery. That's what Floyd Mayweather, before the fight, said this was going to be. He said he was going to knock out Logan Paul in the 3rd round, and it was legalized bank robbery. He didn't quite do that. And I think that's where you have to give Logan Paul credit. It was a win-win, I think, for both them. Win for Logan Paul, who in his second career, amateur fight went 8 full rounds against the greatest of all time, 50-0 Floyd Mayweather. You can go to your grave saying you did that. And for Floyd Mayweather, it's a win for his pocket. Clearly, that was what his number one intentions were. He's getting 50% of the pay-per-views. Those numbers aren't out yet, and 10 million up flat. So I expect his pocket to be like 50 million plus at the very least. So that's why he did this fight. And I think I don't think every opponent, I really do not think every opponent could have generated the buzz around this fight that Logan Paul did, just because of the big name he is. And like, I do really mean this. I know our producer's shaking his head right now, but like everyone 18 and under that bought this fight, and there were a lot of them because they know Logan Paul, they grew up on Logan Paul. They weren't buying this fight to watch just Floyd Mayweather. They wouldn't have watched this fight if he boxed some up-and-comer who really is, taking boxing 100%, who is a serious competitive boxer. They were watching because it's Logan Paul, and he's an entertainer, and that's what he does. But I also think, Logan took this seriously, right? This wasn't like he just came in there. He worked really hard to get ready for this fight, trained every day for months and stuff like that. And so I think when you look at it like that, there's the bigger conversation, because obviously boxing's in a weird spot right now. You have basically YouTubers and social media influencers kind of being the stars of the sport, and Logan and his brother Jake, who's always in the news in the boxing world. And I think a lot of people look down on it as, what is the sport becoming? It's a complete joke. But you have to give them credit because they both take it really seriously. And that's all you can ask for. They get eyeballs on the sport that otherwise wouldn't be tuning in. I know I wouldn't be this in tune if it wasn't them, because I just think they're so interesting and captivating. I want to see what happens. I think I watched both of Logan Paul's previous fights with KSI, and obviously, he was 0-1, and to go up against Floyd Mayweather, he took some real punches, right? Floyd landed some good ones, and he was able to withstand it. So all the credit to him. But yeah, overall, it was an extremely, underwhelming fight. I would have swallowed the bullet and watched Logan Paul get humiliated if it ended in a cool KO or something like that. But we just didn't see it. And to the end of the day, I think it was a money grab.
I don't know. We might have seen a KO. I'm sure you've seen the video. No.
Ridiculous. I know the video you're talking about. There's a video circulating where it's like Floyd kept Logan up to keep the show going. You're taught in that situation, if you're Logan, when you have the 50-pound advantage, to put your dead weight on him. If you looked at his legs, his posture, he kept it. They weren't wiggling. That video, complete bogus. He did not knock Logan out there.
I don't know. But I also don't know if you can say that like they both took this seriously, because to me, this really just felt like, I'm getting money in my pocket and I'm moving on. And I kind of feel like maybe they're just doing it to maybe set up something down the line, a real fight, or if this is just a one and done. But I don't know. I mean, it's just, if it's all about money, I don't know how it's a serious boxing match, which I don't think it was ever intended
I
to
mean,
be.
here's the thing I'll say about that. Everything about Floyd Mayweather is about money, right? I mean, it's
Yes,
addictive.
Money Mayweather.
So obviously, money is going to drive everything. Money talks. But I don't think that's fair to say that, Logan Paul didn't take it seriously. I think Floyd did too. He was working out. He wasn't going into this fight after a bender in Vegas or anything. He was training hard for this. And so obviously this was a cash grab, right? That was the number one intention. It really was. At the end of the day, you look at this fight, you kind of shake your head. What are we doing here? Why did I watch this fight and all that? And it was certainly underwhelming, but there was hype, and I'm sure we're going to look at the numbers, and I'm sure they're going to be very surprising with how well it did, which is why this was a thing, right? Floyd wouldn't have fought a nobody at this point in his career, 44 years of age. He's pretty much done seriously boxing. He did this because he knew it would drive up the pockets. He knew it would generate buzz, and that's what it did at the end of the day.
Sure. One last actually really interesting thing before we go. The college football playoff, it's been talked about that it could possibly expand for years now. Since they came out with the new format of 4 teams, people have been asking for it to expand for a long time now. That's not a new subject, but now we're seeing new developments that the leading most popular candidate is a 12-team format. 12 teams rather than 6 or 8, which other people might be interested in. Ryan, I got to get your thoughts on this. Are you in favor of a 12-team college football playoff?
If the only options are a 12-team or the current format, I'm absolutely 110% in on a 12-team. The format we have right now, it doesn't work. The whole point was to get new teams in it. We have the same 6 teams every year. There's only 6 teams who ever won a game in it. It clearly doesn't work. If you're a group of 5 team, you're not able to get in, as we've seen with the UCFs, as we saw with Cincinnati last year. And when you're able to go to recruits and not be able to pitch, like there is zero, you could play the best all year and still not have a shot at the playoff, it hurts you. And that's, I think, a reason why there's such an imbalance. And so if, I personally am a favor of an 8-team. This 12-team has a lot of similar traits as an 8-team, because you have the 5 Power 5 champions with an auto bid. And so then you have one group of 5 auto bid, which I agree with. I think that in the 8-team, those are the same. And then the difference is kind of the wild card teams, the at-large bids. Right now, there's no guaranteed, there's no automatic bids. So really everything's an at-large bid. But in the 8-team, it would be 2 at-larges. In the 12, it would obviously be 6. And I think that's a little too much. But if you really do look at what an 8-team with auto bids would be, it kind of is a 16, 12-team thing, because those conference championship games would be essentially playoff games, right? The winner of that goes to the playoffs. I know this year there was not a great example, but the Oregon USC Pac-12 championship game had no juice this year, right? Both teams didn't have a chance. I know our producer's a big Ducks fan, but no, this would help him, because I think if you had that game in a year when you get an auto bid, that game is suddenly a playoff game. That is huge stakes. And you're looking at that game at a much different aspect, because it didn't really matter a ton this year besides the banner you throw up for a 3-1 season, whatever it was. But in a normal year, if that gets you into the playoffs, that's what's awesome. And with the 12-team, it would be, I believe the top 4 would get buys, and then you'd have those 8 other teams play at the higher seeds, school. So there'd be home games. I think that'd be interesting. I love that idea of getting the fans involved. I think the neutral sites for the first rounds wouldn't be a great idea. So I love those home games. I love that advantage. And I think that's why you can support a 12-team, because it'd be a huge advantage if you have a Notre Dame home game versus a weaker SEC A&M kind of team. So yeah, I definitely am not a favor of the current system at all. And if we can't get an 8, 12, if 12 is the most popular and 12 is the best chance of getting approved, I am for it, because I am for change. I don't like the current system at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the idea of a home playoff game for, an Alabama or a Clemson or a Penn State. And, that would be really interesting and I think really fun. And it's something new. And I think it could really work well. But I mean, the 12-team format, I think it's a little much. I personally would, be more in favor of, 8 or maybe even 6 teams for that matter. But I mean, you're definitely right. The playoffs do need to expand. I don't think the 4-team format works, but it'll be interesting to see, what develops from this. are they actually going to do 12 teams, or is it going to be a compromise, or are they just going to stick with the 4-team format for the foreseeable future? It's interesting. They can go in a lot of different directions, but I think the 12-team format, it gets a lot more attention on a lot of other great teams, because a lot of great teams miss out on the college football playoff in general. So I think expanding the playoffs will certainly help in that regard, and could actually help college football, provide more intrigue, which is what they want. But that's my take on it. And that'll actually wrap up our show for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Our sports coordinator is Bobby Chaffardini. Our producer tonight is Alex Wolves. And if you missed any portion of tonight's show, you can find clips, or you can watch on demand. You can find clips on our Twitter or YouTube. And if you missed any portion, you can watch the whole thing on demand on our YouTube, WFUV Sports. That'll do it. From Ryan Gregware, I am Brian Raybacks, saying thank you for watching 1-on-1 Nightly, a production of WFUV Sports. Have a good night, everybody.